March 10th, 1987. A Pan Am Boeing 747 had just departed Heathrow Airport for a service to New York. It was a routine flight, a one that the crew would have taken numerous times before. Not long into the flight, as the plane climbed above central England, the pilots of this 747 began noticing problems relating to the pressurization of the aircraft. Passing 20,000 feet, the plane failed to pressurize. The crew descended and attempted to reclimb, but still the plane failed to pressurize as normal. The pilots soon turned their plane back around to London. The pilots did land their plane safely without issues or injury, but the problem became rather clear upon inspection of the door leading to the forward cargo compartment. It had actually become opened. A gap measuring 1.5 inches, nearly 4 centimeters, exposed the inside of the plane to the outside, leading to failed pressurization. An investigation into what had happened highlighted a design flaw in the locking mechanism of the 747's cargo doors that had been known for some time. Boeing was clearly aware of issues pertaining to the cargo door locks, as they released a bulletin on the subject of fuselage doors, hatches, and exits. The incident was just one in a string of multiple others involving the cargo door, and the rollout of changes needed to fix the issue on other planes would be slow, caught up in the web of economics. It was only a matter of time before it would strike again. So what was that design flaw? February 24th, 1989. United Airlines Flight 811 was a trans-Pacific flight between Los Angeles and Sydney, Australia. Flight 811, operated at this time by a Boeing 747, made stopovers in Honolulu and Auckland. The accident flight of discussion today arrived in Honolulu without issue. A change of crew would take place, with the outgoing crew noticing no issues with the plane. The time was after midnight, in the early hours of the morning, and it was a long flight to New Zealand. The flight that night was packed with 355 occupants on board, 337 passengers, 15 flight attendants, and 3 pilots. Many passengers joined the flight in Honolulu, with new baggage and cargo loaded into the cargo hold. United Flight 811 would be slightly delayed. Flight attendants noticed problems with arming of 2 of the cabin doors on the left side of the aircraft. This was rectified before departure. In preparation for leaving the gate again, the forward cargo door was closed. Ground handling staff completed the closing of the door as they would have done plenty of times in the past. What was different on this occasion was out of their control as problems occurred on the other side of the door. Before we continue with the flight, let's take a closer look at the front cargo door on the 747-100. To allow for more space in the cargo compartment, engineers designed a door that would open outward instead of inward, something that still exists on 747s today. On inward opening doors, differences in air pressure and density would mean that the door is locked into its door framing from air pressure differences on either side of the plane's skin and cannot be blown outward. On outward opening doors, locks need to be constructed that are strong enough to withstand this force for hours at a time over many years. Boeing was supposed to have designed redundancies with fail-safe mechanisms to prevent an uncommanded opening of the door, because once that lock fails, the inside air is going to push on and open the door. The lock that Boeing came up with was as follows. A latch pin, which in this case was made from aluminium, is secured with 8 C-shaped cams. When the door is closed from the outside, the cams rotate, and an L-shaped lock sector moves into place, securing the door to the floor of the cargo compartment. Flight 811 left the gate in Honolulu at just after 1:30 in the morning, and was soon airborne for the 9-hour flight to Auckland. Up on the flight deck that night was 59-year-old Captain David Cronin. He was one of the most senior pilots at United Airlines at the time, just days away from his retirement, having joined the airline all the way back in 1954. Over the years, he had spent time flying a variety of different planes at United, accumulating 28,000 flight hours in that time. Captain Cronin had flown frequently and got along well with his first officer, 48-year-old Gregory Slater. He had 14,500 flight hours experience. The flight engineer was 46-year-old Randall Thomas, who had 20,000 flight hours logged, making the three-man team an extremely experienced crew. The pilots had reviewed the weather along their journey. To avoid thunderstorms, they chose to deviate south of their flight plan. For the time being, Captain Cronin chose to keep the seatbelt sign illuminated in the cabin until any unsavory weather had passed. This seemingly small decision by the captain would prove to have saved numerous lives given what happened next. Passing through 22,000 feet, passengers seated over and around where the forward cargo compartment door is located heard a rather strange sound. Surviving passengers described it as a whining noise. What was happening is that an electrical fault sent a signal to command the opening of the door. More specifically, it is believed a short circuit in old, poorly maintained wiring commanded those C-shaped cams to rotate. Once out of place, the door was only held in by the latch pin, which was never designed to bear the load of these air pressure differences alone. In a single moment, the door was ripped from the plane. The higher pressurized air of the aircraft's interior escaped to the outside, forcing the door outward. And it wasn't just the door that was torn away. The explosive decompression had blown out a large section of the fuselage skin. Now, the cabin configuration on the United Airlines Boeing 747-100s allowed for up to 450 passengers to be seated. Most of the cabin featured a 10 abreast seating arrangement in a 3-4-3 configuration. First class was in the nose, whilst business class was located in the distinctive upper deck hump. On this plane, however, some of the passenger cabin was configured in an 8 abreast 2-4-2 configuration towards the front of the plane and above the forward cargo door. 4 rows of seats between rows 8 and 12 had their seats on the right side ejected from the aircraft following the explosion. As a result, 9 passengers were also ejected from the plane. So it wasn't just the door that went, but also a significant section of the fuselage skin, cabin flooring, overhead compartments, baggage, and 9 passengers. One other passenger in business class was almost pulled out of the plane, as was the senior flight attendant who clung to the railing of the stairs linking the 2 passenger decks. Following the event, significant damage was also done to the right side wing and its engines. Impact damage was found on the wing's leading edge and the inboard engine pylon. Severe damage was also noted to the engines themselves. Engine 3 was vibrating violently and needed to be shut down almost immediately, whilst it was noted that a fire had occurred in Engine 4. As to what happened to the ill-fated passengers, the remains of at least one passenger were later found in engine number 3. None of the bodies of the passengers would ever be located in the ocean. Despite the damage done, the pilots could still control the plane's primary control surfaces, as the hydraulic systems were still functional. Upon knowing of the explosive decompression, the pilots found that they couldn't get oxygen from their own supplies. They needed to perform a steep descent so they could breathe normally and not succumb to the effects of hypoxia. With a crippled plane, they needed to turn back to Honolulu. To them, their first suspicion as to what had happened was that perhaps a bomb had gone off, given that the events of Lockerbie occurred just 2 months previously. The time was 2:20 in the morning. The flight engineer, in the need to drastically lower the weight of the plane, jettisoned fuel from the tanks into the ocean. Unable to use the intercom system to communicate with flight attendants, the flight engineer also left the cockpit to inspect the damage and informed the cabin staff of the crew's intentions of landing the plane back in Hawaii. Pilots are well trained on flying their planes with the failure of one engine. To shut down 2 engines on a 747, they needed a lot of speed to keep their plane flying. At low altitude, Captain Cronin implemented his decades' worth of knowledge and experience flying planes as he flew the stricken plane back towards Hawaii. Soon enough, the pilots caught glimpses of night lighting, and the process of getting the plane on the ground commenced. Up till this point, right before landing, no one knew how the plane would behave. Flaps and slats needed to be extended. These change the characteristics of how a plane flies through the air. Asymmetry of the flaps could lead to controllability issues. Sure enough, as the pilots began extending the flaps, asymmetry was noted at the 5-degree setting. No one knew if the landing gear would handle the plane in such a state, or if they would even lower at all. Cautiously, the pilots configured their plane, the flaps only partially extended, and the landing gear was successfully lowered as the plane approached the runway at Honolulu at a faster speed than usual in the region of around 200 knots. Captain Cronin landed his wounded plane at Honolulu and came to a stop on the runway. All passengers evacuated, a number of them noting injuries from the ordeal. Flight attendants also suffered injuries from the evacuation. However, with the exception of the 9 passengers ejected from the plane as a result of the cargo door failure, no one else perished. The investigation surrounding Flight 811 was consumed in controversy. Prior incidents surrounding the locking mechanism on not just the Boeing 747 but also other planes, most notably the DC-10, led to many questions as to why changes were not made sooner despite the knowledge of the design flaw. Economics played a large underlying role in this incident. To bring a plane in to retrofit its cargo doors is costly. The procedure itself, not so much, but costly from the fact that the plane needs to be withdrawn from service, therefore not taking on any passengers, therefore not making money. Notices from aviation authorities gave plentiful time to replace the problem locks, some believing that political lobbying from airlines allowed them to continue operating planes with these types of locks on the cargo doors of 747s, kicking the can down the road, as it were, and it was only a matter of time before it was to claim lives. The parents of a New Zealander passenger on Flight 811 who was killed took matters into their own hands during the investigation. Frustrated by the initial findings by the National Transportation Safety Board, they undertook their own investigation, even obtaining documents previously not released to the public. Following the recovery of the cargo door itself in 1990, the investigation by the NTSB was reopened, and they revised their initial conclusions, putting the cause of the accident down to defective wiring and poor design of the door, laying the blame with Boeing and United Airlines. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it to be interesting, be sure to be subscribed as there is always a new video every Saturday. I just got back from my holiday and things have been rather hectic, gathering everything to make this video ready for you today. I have got a fantastic idea for a video that I think you're going to like, and I would love to make that in the next few weeks, and hopefully I'll get that one out to you with no issue. Stay tuned on the community tab for more information about that. Anyway, it is that time of the week again to take a moment to thank my amazing patrons over on Patreon for their continuing ongoing support to the channel. Their names are on the screen right now, so if you see your name here, a massive thanks to you. If you yourself want to support the channel further, then consider joining the Disaster Breakdown Patreon from just £1 per month, and the link to that will be in the pinned comment below. All patrons get early access to all new content 48 hours before it goes up publicly on YouTube. That's it from me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to follow my personal Twitter page, that too will be in this video's description. Thanks, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.